who says that since October 2010, from all sides there was political pressure put on the CAG. He says that he has fairly concrete information that political pressures from all sides, he says, that's a caveat, was put on the CAG.
Well, I think, Arnab, the only person who can answer that question, whether any pressure was put on him or not, is really the CAG. I don't think anybody should second guess it or should answer on his behalf. You know, all that we have at this point in time, you know, is the transcript of a telephone call, you know, which has been recorded. And as I said, you know, that's something which has not been examined as yet. So therefore, to come to a value judgment as to whether there was pressure or not, or whether, you know, that was taken as pressure by officials of the CAG, or whether they acted in pursuance of, you know, what was expected out of them, are really questions which to which answers have not come in as yet. So for me to conclude one way or the other, I think would be inappropriate. But to Mr. TSR Subramanian's specific point, if he says that pressure has been put on the CAG and he has specific information, I think he should put it in the public domain as to who's put pressure on the CAG, what is the kind of pressure which was put on him, you know, what exactly were those people expecting out of the CAG, because as he said, that there's a constitutional authority.
Okay, got that.
Well, let me say one thing.
Mr. Swamy, yes.
Well, you see, it's like this. The licenses which were given to these 9 telecom companies, many of them later on sold a large proportion of their shares to foreign companies. For example, Swan to Etisalat,
yes.
Unitech to Telenor, Tata to Docomo, and Estel to a Russian company, etc., etc. Now, all of them were able to sell per share, in a sense, if you take the net asset value, about 8 times the price they paid the government of India. So if you just take the revenue you got of 14,000 crores for sale of licenses, multiply that by 8,
yes.
You already, cross.
No, but the actual scale,
it becomes about 1,12,000 crores. Plus, of course, the CDMA and the crossovers, etc.
Point taken.
1,76,000 doesn't look very extraordinary when you see that what is undeniable is the shares were sold, and they were sold at 8 times the price at which they paid the government of India for the license.
I take that, but I still want to ask Mahesh Jethmalani. I know you have to go, Mr. Jethmalani. Take this one point, that the fact is, Mr. Jethmalani, that again and again you have a very clear assertion being made that one particular CAG official was not in a position to put his views on his view of the real figure of the loss. So the question is, Mr. Jethmalani, why was there an attempt at rushing through with the audit to reach that spectacular figure? And look at it in a completely non-partisan way, Mr. Jethmalani. Does that not raise questions about, why there was a hurry? Why there were differences, points of view which were not raised? What were the internal notes within the CAG? Etc., etc. Yes.
I'm going to say this in as least partisan a manner as I can.
Yes.
Let me say one thing. First of all, the issue of loss is a pending issue. Most of the accused persons are going to argue in that case that there is no loss caused and therefore there's no offence committed at all. Now, Dr. Swamy has given you something which I share that view, but it's not for me to say. But since he said it, that yes. you have a measure of the kind of loss from the equity dilution figures which Unitech and Swan indulged in,
yes.
With those 2 foreign companies. So you have some measure of loss. So you can say that was the real value. And ultimately, if you don't have a public auction for this, you can argue that a public servant who disposed of spectrum.
No, but why was there a rushing through with the audit to reach that spectacular figure? Was there a rushing through of the audit to reach a spectacular figure?
Second point, Arnab, I do not believe there was any rushing through. This rushing through is a myth. There's a lot of kite flying going on the press. There's a deliberate and motivated attempt, an orchestrated attempt to undermine the institution of the Controller and Auditor General.
Okay.
The office of the officer, one minute.
Who's behind it?
The Controller and Auditor General, according to the Constituent Assembly, is more important than even judges of the Supreme Court. His salary is charged for the consolidated fund. His salary is charged for the consolidated fund. He cannot. His salary cannot.
But who's
be
behind this? No, but Mahesh Jethmalani, it's against your nature not to be direct. Who's behind this attempt? Say it to Manish Tiwari so I can get a response. Who's behind this attempt to undermine the office?
Those persons who are most affected by the criminality that is pending in the court and their supporters within politics and outside it. I won't say more than that.
Here's the response. 1 minute. Hear the response. Don't go. Hear the response. Manish Tiwari, that's a broad finger pointing it in a certain direction. Yes.
Well, since the finger ostensibly goes across the board, I don't think it really warrants a response, Arnab. But to a point which was raised earlier, may I very respectfully point out again without breaking privilege,
yes.
Even on the question of sale/dilution of equity,
yes.
you had a CAG official, who recorded on the file that, if you are going to use this method of arriving at a presumptive loss, you are on a very sticky wicket and it is not going to hold water. So that's exactly what I'm saying. You see, there is disconsonance within the CAG ranks. This is, this is not something which has come from outside sources or from experts who have independently looked at it. This is a part of the entire CAG decision-making process. And if these reservations emanate from the principal auditor who has signed the report, which was countersigned by the CAG, I think it at least warrants an examination, and that's what the Joint Parliamentary Committee is trying to do.
Why shy away from it, Mr. Swamy? Why shy away from it? Manish Tiwari raises a point. There is a discordance within an organization. Why not look into it?
Yes, there's always discordance within an organization. What is so surprising? Do you think that the PAC didn't have a discordance themselves? The report was produced and the congressmen all boycotted that report, and it had to be set aside by a majority of 1. So discordance is a part of democracy, and I don't think in a big organization, if one individual decides that he wants to stick his neck out and say, no, this is not a correct calculation, well, I'm sorry, the others didn't agree. And he himself didn't write a minute of dissent. He went along.
Was he allowed to?
Saying that, well, I was forced to sign it.
Was he
allowed
to?
Character is like.
Was he allowed to? Was he asked to? What are the internal notes? Manish was responding. Yes. TSR Subramaniam, last response coming to you, but first Manish. Yes. Manish.
Well, with all due respect, again, I would like to point out that in fact there was a minute of dissent. So therefore, to say that there was no dissent, I think would be an erroneous statement. And the second thing I would like to say that it is in the nature of democracy that reports are adopted either unanimously or by a majority.
Manish.
And if the majority of the members do not approve a report and it is rejected, that is where it ends. So therefore, if the PAC was unable to function in a non-partisan manner and get a report adopted, it is most unfortunate. I think the responsibility lies upon, the people who lead the process, to walk the extra mile and see that the consensus is generated and the whole thing, is done in a non-partisan manner.
Okay, now, are you underplaying it? I don't know, but TSR Subramaniam also wants to respond to you. 1 second. TSR Subramaniam, before I come to you, let me make one point. Was this particular official given a hard copy of the final report for his perusal? How much time did he get to read it? Was he kept away from the final drafting of the report? Was he given any time to see it? Would you not, if you were in office, take these issues with great concern, given the enormity and the political impact of this particular report? TSR.
Arnab, are we now converting the CAG to be the main accused in this case?
Good point.
You have let off Raja, Kanimuri and a host of others. And now, yes, please start a case against him. Let the PAC go into the CAG's conduct. It will quite in keeping. I don't think any CAG has been maligned as much as the current one is, because all the previous CAGs were extremely helpful. This man has stood his ground. So I think if you, through a formal motion, make the CEC, make the CAG, make the Supreme Court, all of these constitutional authorities, whenever they go against the interest of the government, make them accused and charged, number 1. Number 2, there's only one CAG. It's a completely internal matter within the organization. I think CAG could very well say, this is my view, this is my opinion. RP Singh's opinion has no value in any forum. The CAG's opinion has value in every forum, number 2.
Exactly.
Number 3, I understand, I have not seen the papers. R.P. Singh had signed the final report.
Yeah.
He has no locus standi to speak after that at all. He may have had any opinion earlier. If he did not have time, he should have said, I have not had time. If he dissented, if he does not agree, he says, I do not agree with paras 83, 85, whatever number. Once he signed, it will be improper for him to go back. Something like I'm sorry to say this, a minister did a couple of months back. Once he signs something and once you approve, you can't go back and say, I don't know anything about it. That will be improper.
Manish Tiwari, are you trying to encourage dissent within a constitutional authority? Debates getting serious. Last rebut. Last rebut to the Congress.
Two things, Arnab. The first thing I would like to point out is that there is a difference between criticizing an individual and criticizing a report which might emanate out of a institution.
Yes.
Supreme Court judgments are also critiqued. They are not only critiqued by lawyers, they are also critiqued in the public domain. So therefore, if there is a report of the CAG and it is critiqued or it is examined by a parliamentary committee, I think there's nothing wrong in it.
After all, not on the process.
Good point. Good point. Good point. Manish Tiwari, TSR Subramanian is saying, yes, they are critiqued. 1 minute. Manish Tiwari, can you hear me? Manish Tiwari, we've lost the line. I want TSR Subramanian to make the point again, then we'll get him back because the debate's getting heated tonight. Yes, TSR Subramanian, you were saying it's critiqued,
no,
but it's
Supreme
critiqued
Court
on merits.
Judgments are critiqued.
Yes.
But then not on the processes, not on who he spoke with, what he did, what the internal notings were. On the judgment, they are critiqued.
On the judgments, they are critiqued. Have I got Manish Tiwari back? Let's see. Not yet. Not yet. Would you like to add in on that, Subramanian Swamy, as we wait to get Manish Tiwari's response on that?
Well, I certainly agree that ultimately what matters is the report. And just because somebody has an opinion which is not in consonance with the report, and then that person also happens to be a person who ultimately signed. So I think there is nothing to debate actually. I think this whole thing has been conjured up, in my opinion, to discredit an organization which has put the government in a lot of embarrassment.
Yes, now here's the point. I don't know if you heard TSR Subramanian, but since you're back, Manish Tiwari, I want you to finally respond on this. Yes, reports are critiqued. Yes, judgments of the court also are critiqued. But they are critiqued on the merits, not on the process, not on who said what, which junior official told whom that. That's what TSR Subramanian says.
Well, Arnab, I think what you need to appreciate out here is that it is not the process which is being critiqued. What is being critiqued is the manner in which you have arrived at a particular destination. And if the principal actors in the process of formulation of a particular document, are of an opinion, which is very germane and which is not taken into consideration, and they do decide, to come out and speak about it, because after all, the JPC did not take suo motu cognizance of it. It is because all these matters appeared in the public domain, those officials decided to come and speak out. The contradictory figures started appearing, and there was a huge variance, because between 2,600 crores and 1,76,000 crores, there's a variance of 80 times. I think the Joint Parliamentary Committee, or any parliamentary committee which has that mandate, is duty bound and responsible to look into it. So therefore, I think you need to make a distinction between the denigration of an individual, which is not the brief of the Joint Parliamentary Committee or any political party, and then looking at the report which they have produced and finding out whether the figures which have been put into that report, whether they have been arrived at through a process of due diligence, and that's exactly what we are trying to do, and I think that's the responsibility we owe to the nation.
What is due diligence? Who needs to be gone into? Is the scam bigger? Are the figures bigger? Is the criminality bigger? Or is the process bigger? So many debates. The story is getting complicated. I thank you, gentlemen, for joining me in News Hour Debate number 2 tonight.